I was watching my shit on YouTube earlier, seeing some of the shit I was talking about earlier on YouTube, and like getting because I generally don't watch the video, the things that I record. I don't watch the shit. I don't even watch it. Like I watch the beginning of it just to get an idea of what I'm going to title it when I put it on YouTube. But pretty much haven't gone back and looked at it, and I've been going back and looking at it and shit. And I'm a pretty logical guy. I mean, I smoke a lot of fucking weed. I know it's that shit. But overall, I'm a pretty logical motherfucker. Shit I'm saying is making sense. And I posted earlier this thing by Dr. Amos Wilson. And I really actually do need to study more Dr. Wilson than I have in the past because he is another brilliant fucking psychologist, black psychologist. And I kind of like forget about him, but don't forget about him because I mean I have a book written by him. And then there's Jawanzo Kunjufu too, which is another, you know what I'm saying, prominent black psychologist. Jawanzo Kunjufu is more of a sociologist than a psychologist, but he uses psychology in relationship to his sociological fucking theories, which are pretty sound, you know. So, you know, and I'm looking at Dr. Amos, and I mean Dr. Wilson, and I'm like, wow, that's crazy. He's talking about the same thing that I'm talking about in relationship to the mimetic structures development of genes, and then not just the development of genes or genetic structure, but the psychology that derives from that genetic structure. That your history has a direct effect on your psychology. And that black people have had an entirely different historical experience in America than white folks. And not just to mention that the fact that we have an entire genetic makeup. Regardless, there is only about fucking 1% differentiation between us and chimps. We're not going to consider all primates as being as equally interpreting information from the environment, even though there's a close genetic similarity to them. That we as human beings, as Homo sapiens, interpret information from the environment like all other primates do. We don't. No matter how closely genetically we how close genetically we are to those other primates, chimpanzees, orangutans. We don't consider ourselves as interpreting the information from the environment identically to the way that orangutans or chimpanzees do, even though that we're genetically, you know, similar. Just no more than we should African Americans think that we interpret information from the environment the same way in which Europeans do. See, that's the colored concept. That we're just colored white folks. We're not just colored white folks. We are an entirely different species of subspecies of Homo sapien or hominid, because there is evidence, observable phenomenon in nature that proves that they are genetic mutations of the original Homo sapien in which we're derived from. They're derived from us. So they have to, based upon these slight genetic differentiations, interpret information from the environment differently than we do. Our hair texture, the thickness of our nose, the thickness of our fucking tissue, the thickness of our bone, the way in which we fucking digest or fucking vitamin D or absorb vitamin D from the environment versus the way that they don't. These are realities. These are not racist. You know what I'm saying? This is true evolutionary humanitarianism. It's seeing us as we evolve specifically, diversely, and how we interpret information from the environment differently. We are entirely different species in relationship to the subspecies the subspecies of the species in which we find ourselves in. You cannot treat, there are differentiations in the way in which different breeds of dog interpret information from the environment based upon their physiologies, and they have a closer genetic connection or than we do, or as just as because that's kind of like something else entirely to talk about those genetics. But just as a broad example, that mixing two and every that comes down to individuals and dealing with individuals mixed of two different ethnicities, and that could comprise new ethnicity interprets information differently from the environment based upon its physiology. You can't escape these things. And that's the crazy shit about this reality that we're living in, that we want to escape the objective reality. That's insanity. It's insane to try to escape the objective reality. You're faced by that objective reality, regardless of what intersubjective agreement you create within that objective reality. The objective reality is always the prevalent reality. And any attempt to distance yourself from that objective reality is called insanity. It's insane. It's a psychological standard for insanity. That's why I say we're all fucking crazy. Because we're trying to live in a reality that is divorced from the objective reality that we all live in. This European or this Western intersubjective agreement is an attempt to divorce itself from the objective reality. That somehow black folks are just colored white folks. When in actuality, the objective reality shows that white folks are mutated Africans. Asians are mutated Africans. The evidence supports this. The objective, observable phenomenon in nature supports this as a reality. And we can't escape that. And that has to be taken into account in the way in which black people, or all ethnicities, specifically black people, in relationship, because black people are the most maladaptive in relationship to accepting the reality of their physiology in the way in which it interprets information from the environment, because we have this, one we're calling this God concept, this misconstrued God concept of this invisible guy in the sky who's specifically concerned with the social interactions of humans. What? You're an omnipotent being who's concerned with the fucking social interactions of this specific species? And you created to be social. Now, nature is concerned with our social interactions only in relationship to how adaptive or maladaptive they are. Not how moral or immoral they are, but how efficient they are. If we're inefficient in our adaptive capacity to the ecosystem, nature will let us just perish. And that's the point that we gotta start understanding. Because I was reading old girl shit earlier, and it's all about this. Too many black people have this view, even Netarians, Netatarians, with Netatarianism, the Kemetus and shit, the Comedians, have this concept that these antiquated models, these antiquated scientific models are superior to an advanced modern scientific model based upon scientific evidence derived from, scientific method. It's not like the scientific method, popped on the earth or came by way of white folks. White folks took the scientific method and utilized it to create a model that supported their specific ethnic agenda, and diminished, devalued, and destroyed the pre-existing scientific model that had our ethnic agenda at its forefront. It's not like we didn't want them to have their own scientific model with their ethnic agenda at the forefront. We just didn't want to lose ours. And they needed ours to be lost in order for theirs to be superior. Because at this very formation, they understood the inferior nature of their scientific model in relationship to their ethnic agenda. And their ethnic agenda had to include the suppression of our scientific model, utilizing the same methodology. So what we need to do is we need to reacquire the methodology and also extract the data within their existing model that supports our specific ethnic agenda. It's that simple. It sounds complex. I mean, it sounds simple, but there's some complexities to it because human psychology falls into it, and the manipulation of human psychology, the brainwashing of black people as a whole, in which we believe, and I can't for the life of me understand why black people believe this. I've been having discussions with black people for this, and I've tried to simulate to this idea that there's this invisible guy in the sky. Even if there was an invisible guy in the sky, black people have to come to the determination that this invisible guy in the sky was on the side of white folks and not on the side of black folks. That this invisible guy in the sky doesn't care if a white guy walks into a church of black people and shoots them dead. Based upon the, and again, like Kevin Wesley was talking about, this idea of you reap what you sow. If you reap what you sow, and I use the term, you reap what you sow. I do. I use it all the time. And when I use it, it's in relationship to human agency. That's why black people deal a lot more with what they reap. Sowing of what they reap than white people do. Because there's an actual human agency involved in making sure black people reap what they sow. There's no human agency involved in making sure white people reap what they sow. We are putting no intent into doing so. Now, earlier I was talking about the Mayat handling certain things, and I'm putting it into the Mayat's hands to handle certain things as far as the laws of nature occur. Even that has a non-local action upon my part. I am acting non-locally in order to, and that you can only do that non-local. You can only engage in non-local action by way of some level of self-awareness. Again, Arthur C. Clarke's third law of prophecy. Those things of a higher, and I've seen it fucking termed, articulated a lot better in fucking science fiction movies and TV shows and shit. But Arthur C. Clarke's third law of prophecy, things that appear of a high advanced science will appear to be magic to those of a lesser awareness. You know what I'm saying? And just read Arthur C. Clarke's third law of prophecy. So a lot of this shit seems like magic in relationship to the fact that it's a higher science. Our science is a more evolved science than the science, even in this antiquated form. My battery's dying. Even in its antiquated form is a more advanced science than their modern science. Because we had a more advanced understanding of the basis in which their modern science came from. We had a more advanced understanding of the philosophy in which their science derived from. A more holistic viewpoint of that science. They had a more of that philosophy, they had a more dualistic view of that philosophy in which their science derived from. Western philosophy, which Western science is derived from Eastern philosophy, or Eastern African or African philosophy, in which had a holistic perspective. Europeans developed a dualistic perspective of the same philosophy and therefore derived a dualistic science from that dualistic philosophy. If we were to go back to our holistic philosophy, we would see the steps in which they developed their dualistic science and develop our own holistic science alongside their dualistic science derived from the holistic